Good evening. Welcome to the February 3rd meeting. Let's start by standing and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. I'd like to start off tonight with a moment of silence. We had a very sad moment in town last week when a second grader, Diana Appleton, passed away after a long term of health issues. So if you could please join the town in remembering her and holding her family and her friends with us. Thank you. So time to go ahead and approve the minutes. May I have a motion to approve, approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
This is for the January 6th meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0 passes. For the January 21st meeting, may I have a motion?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0 passes. We have two presentations this evening. The first one of our attorneys, Andy Berg, will be giving us on the building moratorium. He will be giving the town an update on what's going on.
Thank you, Jill. I have a microphone because my voice is a little hoarse, so bear with me. As some of you or all of you may be aware, the town passed a moratorium on the issuance of all building permits for 60 days, and that was in response to an issue the town's having with certain landowners erecting houses containing 4 or 5 or more bedrooms and renting to multiple people per room. I guess, as we all know, it's mostly college housing. So the town council passed a building moratorium, put a stop to all new construction. Just instead of differentiating between different types of properties, it was just a blanket moratorium. Last Thursday, myself and Mr. Davis were notified that a lawsuit had been filed, and they were seeking an emergency injunction called a temporary restraining order from the Superior Court in Kent County, because they're covered. It was sent out because the judges here are too busy. So what happens there is a judge will review the pleadings and make a very early determination of whether there might be a cause of action, and if there's any doubt, generally what they'll do is they'll issue a restraining order which puts everything on hold or will stop the enforcement of the moratorium while the judge takes a little bit more time to sort things out. So obviously the town's concern was if the judge issued a blanket restraining order on the enforcement of the building moratorium, it would allow a window of opportunity for the developers that we're concerned about to get their permits issued and proceed with their plans, much to the chagrin of some of the neighbors, and also present a serious fire hazard by overloading certain houses. So on last Friday, myself and another assistant town solicitor who handles zoning issues, Steve Marcello, we went to the Superior Court. We conferenced this case with opposing counsel and with the judge, and we decided that we would agree to what's called a consent order, which is an order from the court basically limiting the enforcement of the building moratorium. So we made 2 exceptions. By consent, the court ordered that any building permit seeking new construction or remodeling of 4 bedrooms or less would be exempt from the moratorium, which took the class out that we were mostly concerned about, the 5 bedrooms plus. The other condition, because one of the litigants, it affected him, would be that the moratorium would not be applied to any structures in R40 or R80 zoning. There were some large houses, single-family houses. It was not a threat for student housing that were in these areas. So they wouldn't have qualified for the 4 bedrooms or less exemption. So we did a limited exemption there, R40s and R80s. This addressed the issues that were before the court at the time. The judge was satisfied. He was not going to issue a restraining order, a blanket restraining order. Both sides agreed. We anticipate there might be some more litigation coming up, but for now, the moratorium is in effect. with those limitations, and it's addressed their concerns, the litigants, and it's also has not undermined the town's goals in passing the building moratorium.
Do any council member have questions for Andy? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next is a presentation on shoreline mapping LiDAR survey. We have some of the University of Rhode Island oceanography graduate students here. They could come on and present to us.
My name's John King, and this is Brian Cacioppioli. We're both at the Graduate School of Oceanography. I guess it's interesting. Am I supposed to be facing this way or this way?
You're right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're going to talk about the results of a survey that we've been doing for the last year of the town beach. I'm going to start off by sort of describing why we're doing it and the background on this sort of monitoring. We've been doing this monitoring since the early 1960s at the Graduate School of Oceanography, mostly on the South Coast. We use this vessel to do this new type of survey. Usually we just survey from land using a traditional surveying technique. Let me see if I can advance this. Okay. Yeah, so we've been doing this since the early 60s, and there's a couple elements of this. We're trying to understand and quantify seasonal changes along the beach. Most of you have probably noticed that there's an annual beach cycle during the big storms in the fall and the winter. A lot of sand gets eroded from the beach and it gets stored in bars offshore. And then just due to normal wave action, when the storms are gone and you just have normal tides and waves, a lot of the sand in the bars comes back onto the beach. So you tend to get a larger, wider beach during the summer. And sort of monitoring this over a period of time helps to inform management decisions about sand replenishment, whether to do it or not, and what sort of volumes you're going to need. Okay. So this beach survey that we've been doing, you can see our sites. They're all on the south coast of Rhode Island, and these tend to have more dramatic changes in beach volume. Narragansett Beach, because it's around the corner, you have major changes in volume, but you're a little sheltered from the big storms, except if they come from the southeast direction. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. So we basically have been doing this since the 60s using pretty old technology. We're just using transits. We upgraded in the 90s to a laser transit, but this is kind of what I would describe as 19th century technology. You have a transit and you have somebody holding a pole that you're taking measurements on, and you produce a profile that is a cross-section of the beach, and you can determine the volume of the sand on the beach with this technique. And if you kind of look at some of the longer records, you can see Green Hill Beach, there's a long-term trend of major retreat of the beach. It's been losing volume over the entire time of the time series. So the time series goes from 63 up to the present, and it's a steady retreat of the beach. Some other beaches like East Beach, no replenishment or anything going on there, but it tends to be holding its volume. And part of the difference there is where it's located on the coastline. Green Hill Beach is near a headland. Headlands erode more quickly than barrier beaches, which is what East Beach is. Unfortunately, Narragansett Beach is more like a headland beach than a barrier beach. So we don't have a time series to show what the trend is. That's part of the reason that we're doing this. The other reason that we're doing this is if you look at real data, which is from the Newport tide gauge, which goes back to 1930. So you got roughly 90 years of data. Over the last 90 years, there's been roughly a foot rise in sea level that's well documented. But the really scary thing to look at is we're predicting using various models. These models are if we have high concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and a lot of global warming, you get high rates of sea level rise. So if you look at predictions that NOAA's making at this same tide gauge in Newport, for Rhode Island by 2050, they're predicting between 3 and 4 feet of sea level rise in the high-end scenarios. The reason that I'm pointing at that rather than the low-end scenarios is this data has been tracking the high-end scenarios over the last 20 years. So we're thinking right now that this curve is more likely than these. I don't think anybody thinks that this is what's going to happen. That's more, I think this trend is down in here somewhere. So, we're looking at 4 feet by 2050, and they're projecting about 11 feet by 2100. So what we're trying to do is advise you on what you should do to maintain your beach as a nice wide beach where it is for maybe the next couple of decades. Because the bottom line is, if this scenario happens, your beach is going to move. It's not going to be where it is anymore, and you're going to have to be thinking about, okay, how do we acquire the real estate on the other side of 1A, frankly. But that's a discussion for another day. And what we're trying to do with this survey is just accurately track, okay, what are we going to get moving forward? It's not likely to be this. Is it likely to be this? And give you some decades to react to that, because obviously you need a town beach in the town of Narragansett. Okay, so I'm going to hand off to Brian now, and he's going to tell you how we do what we do now, and we have brought it into the present century.
All right, thank you, John. So I just want to circle back a little bit to traditional beach profiles, the method that John has outlined. And I want to talk about some of the limitations and drawbacks. So a traditional beach survey, as John described, is just a two-dimensional transect in elevation. If those profiles are spread across a beach, you're not really gaining any information between those profiles. So although the data is very accurate, very repeatable at that one location, you're not really understanding changes along the entire beach. And so what we're doing is we're bringing beach monitoring into the 21st century. John said that the methods that we've been using since the 1960s are really kind of old-fashioned. So some of the animations and figures I'm going to show in this are representing our first year of survey at Narragansett Town Beach, and we're going to show some of the results of our using this LiDAR technology. And I'll explain what LiDAR is in a moment. And if we can get this animation going. So as we fly through this animation, this is data that we collected at Clayhead Bluffs in Block Island. And the reason I'm showing this is the data is pretty spectacular. The bluffs are really iconic. You see them when you're passing on the ferry over to New Shoreham. And what's immediately apparent is we're no longer dealing with two-dimensional elevation transects. We're actually getting data along the entire coastline seamlessly, and there's no gaps anymore. So using this LiDAR technology, we're no longer limited to just two-dimensional elevation transects. So now we can make better informed decisions about how the beach is responding to storms and future climate change if we use this in a monitoring type method. There we go. Okay, so I used a word that you guys might not be that familiar with. LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging. It's the best way I like to describe it in a layman's term is imagine standing on a beach at nighttime. You can't really see your surroundings, but you have a flashlight. You turn your flashlight on, and all of a sudden you're gaining information about your surroundings. LiDAR is kind of similar in that it's a light-based technology, and we use it as a mapping technology. So imagine just flicking the switch on this system. all of a sudden you're gaining all this data. So we're able to produce a three-dimensional model like we saw in that fly-through animation. And that data is actually usable. It's real elevation data all along the beach, and you're no longer stuck with just two-dimensional transects. You have continuous coverage across an entire beach. And LiDAR can be implemented in several different ways. It can be mounted simply on a tripod, much like a camera, pointed in the direction that you want data acquired, and you basically would take a snapshot. But more useful in beach monitoring would be to mount it on a boat like we do. So in this image right here is the Shanna Rose, which is one of our survey boats. You can see the LiDAR system is mounted high on the boat, and it's looking perpendicular to the direction that the boat moves, so out 90 degrees. And so what we do is we advance the boat along the coastline, so we pull up to Narragansett Town Beach. We move into about 10 feet of water when it's safe to do so, and we turn on our system and continuously record data. So basically, the system is emitting light, and it's reflecting back to the system, and a record of elevations is being recorded. We integrate this with really high precision GPS and vessel orientation, and when we mash all this data together, that's how we produce these 3D models. So how do we go from these three-dimensional pretty pictures to something that's actually usable for beach management decisions? Well, first we take our data, which is a series of points, and each point in this image, so the left-hand part of the screen is Narragansett Town Beach in LiDAR view, so to speak. You can see different features such as buildings, the seawall in the left corner. You can even see the parking lot, dune fencing, etc. The LiDAR system doesn't discriminate what it's getting points reflected from. It's going to reflect off anything that's in the field of view. However, when we're trying to monitor beaches or elevation change, we don't really care about people standing on the beach or buildings or structures. So what I do is I take all the raw data and filter out the points that aren't useful. So we're only interested in elevation that represents the actual beach. And so that little flow chart on the left or on the right-hand side is showing how we go from just the raw data all the way to a processed model of the beach. We call this a digital elevation model. And so here are some results from our year one surveys. So how we set up and structured our surveys is that we go out and do a survey in March, which would coincide with kind of a low beach volume, because it's at the end of that winter season where a lot of the sand has been scraped away and hasn't had time to come back onto the shore through natural processes. And then we also do a second survey at the end of the summer seasons when quieter conditions, lower wave energy, allows some of that sand to come back on the beach. And by kind of keeping track, doing these two surveys, we're able to really capture changes in seasonality of the beach, or how much volume the beach regains over the summer season. And that's kind of where we're at. We just finished our first year of survey, so we can really only track the seasonal change from March to September. But what we hope to do, and what we recommend, is continuing this beach monitoring program into the future so that we can reestablish baseline data, get elevation data, and understand, is Narragansett more like Green Hill? Is it losing data? Is it losing elevation in a continuous way? Or is it more like East Beach? Does it fluctuate more irregularly? So that implementing this in a long-term monitoring program is kind of the way to go if we want to make science-informed decisions about how to manage our beaches. So real quick, the left panel is just a raw digital elevation model from March. And then on the right-hand side is a comparison of our digital elevation models through the two surveys. And so what you're seeing is obviously a colored map. The green colors indicate where the beach gained volume. So that's from March to September, we had gains of beach volume in the lower part of the beach. And actually, this trend is dominated by rising elevation or gaining beach. But this is what to be expected with the seasonal beach cycle. What we're really interested in doing is kind of tracking this through time, year to year, to see if Narragansett's a type of beach that loses sediment continuously, or is it a beach that just more naturally fluctuates year to year. And just one quick slide. This data that we're producing right now, Narragansett really hasn't had a way of monitoring their beaches. We haven't been tracking beach changes or elevation changes. And there have been some historical data sets that our LiDAR system is very comparable with, which is useful because any data that we're able to get our hands on, since our data is in real space and is real elevations, we can compare it easily with any historical data that we can get our hands on or any future data sets as well. And with that, I think that's all we have for you.
Thank you. Any member of the council have any questions for them before they leave?
Yeah, I had a question. In year 21, you said that this 2021, yeah, 2100. Are we going to have would you say the sea's going to be 11 feet higher? Is that what you said?
That's what NOAA's saying.
Noah.
NOAA.
Okay. All right.
And that's a model that they posted about a year ago. And what I would say is if you trace the history of these sea level rise curves, and it's all about, as we learn more about the big ice sheets like Greenland and West Antarctica, they're melting faster than we originally thought. And all the water goes back into the ocean, increases sea level rise. So,
All right.
yeah,
So the last 100 years, we lost how much? A foot?
no, it's only a foot over the last
Foot.
100 years. Yeah,
100 years,
Yeah.
ocean rose a foot.
yeah, but
In 80 years, it's going to go 11 feet. Is that what you're telling me?
that's what I'm telling you.
All right. Now, you guys are doing all these computations for the next, say, 5 years.
Yeah,
So in year 5,
yeah.
we're going to lose volume because the water's going to rise 7 inches a year, 3.5 feet.
It accelerates moving forward. So you're not going to, if you look at the graph, it's 2020 now. Basically, what I would recommend is you want to monitor every year or every couple of years until, say, 2030, 2035, and see where you end up on this range of curves.
So do you do rise, you
Yes.
do the rise, okay? So
Yeah.
so what happens in 5 years when it's only rose 3 inches? Then you pull those projections back, or?
Yes, yeah. Basically, these predictions have been made, but they're model predictions, but they've been making these predictions since the 1990s. And what we've
Well,
seen,
when I was 10,
yeah,
I remember being petrified as a kid
yeah,
because they said that in 10 years, let me see, by 2000, we're supposed to have 10 inches of ice everywhere in the Northeast. We're going to have a new ice age.
yeah. I don't know who said that, but
Yeah, well, it seems like every 10 years they come out with a new disaster. Okay, I'm just making sure you guys make sure you keep an eye on these seas so I don't get caught without my water wing somewhere,
well,
I don't.
yeah. And what's going to be important is that since the 1990s, we're now at 2020. It's been tracking the top curve, not the bottom curve.
Okay.
The actual data.
So from 1990 to today,
Yeah.
we've gone up.
It's accelerating. It's no longer, like if you go back to 90 years, it's a foot total.
Yep.
But the rate of increase is increasing. So it used to be only go up maybe a centimeter and a half, like less than an inch
Yep.
a year.
Yep.
Now it's up to about 3 point something. So it's kind of doubled
3 inches a
in
year.
the last couple hundred years. And what they're predicting is that's an exponential curve. This one is a linear curve. We fit that to linear. What they're saying is it's not going to be linear anymore. It's going to be exponential. It's going to go up much faster. And I think if you're not keeping on top of this, you're going to get caught with your beach on top of 1A instead of where you want it. That's what happens when sea level rise increases. You're not going to not have a beach. It's just not going to be where.
Well, you think we
want
got parking problems now?
Yes.
Wait till we can.
Exactly. Your beach is going to.
We're gonna have a hell of it. We're gonna have a hell of it.
You've seen this a few times already, where your beach ends up in the parking lot. You got to scoop it up and put it back on the beach. You're going to be able to keep doing that for a while, but not forever.
Okay.
Sure, thank you.
So just one note. This study was brought forward to the Rec Advisory Board and to Steve Wright, Parks and Recreation. And one of the reasons that we brought it forward was because, again, we didn't have a baseline. And what we were looking for is a baseline. Yes, people can make predictions, and there can be predictions of the year 2000 to 2030, but having a baseline information from these people at URI to be able to tell us, well, here's what we did in the year 2019, and then if they revisit every couple of years how often Steve puts in for it to be revisited, we will have actual baseline and the actual information in front of us, so that maybe in 2030, it may not be 11 feet. If it's 6 feet 5 inches, then we're in a bonus round, and it shows that all the predictions were off a little bit. You know, the world is a big world, so to predict where the water is going to be and what height it's going to be in every location, I would think somebody would be really good at being able to do that. But this is all about a baseline, and I think they're doing a wonderful job with it. And I think we need to continue with it so we will know exactly where we stand with our beach. It's our most valuable asset.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone from the council have an agenda item they'd like to pull? Seeing none, will someone make a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sure. Mr. Wojciechowski?
I just wanted to speak on the police car repair. I was so happy that we're moving in the direction of 3 bids. I've been an advocate of getting 3 bids on everything we do if possible, and we've done that, and I want to congratulate the staff and the manager for doing that. I've noticed it, and I hope it continues. We can continue to search for people to make additional bids. Also, on the item, it had courtesy. Can I have what really, town manager? I think you put this on. Life is short, but there is always time for courtesy. Was on the agenda. I was so happy to see a positive thing going on. It looks like the town manager is moving it all down the line to all the staff, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stanley. That's actually Jim's tagline on his signature on his email also. Okay, so we're moving on to new business. The first motion is a motion to introduce, read, pass, and accept as a first reading a resolution amending the official list of parking restrictions and regulations in the town of Narragansett in accordance with the Narragansett Code of Ordinances to restrict parking on Algonquin Road. This
So
comes from the
moved.
police department.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 4-0. Next is a motion to approve and request the Surfers Healing RI to conduct a one-day free surf camp for children with autism at the town beach on September 19th, 2020, from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., subject to state and local regulations. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0 passes. The next is a motion to approve and authorize the Narragansett Park and Recreation Department to partner with Narrow River Preservation Association and Narrow River Land Trust in offering 5 educational programs at Middlebridge property, subject to state and local regulations. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second, by Joey. Anybody, discussion by anyone? This is a great event that's put on every year. Jesse and I sit on the Land Trust. It's something that the town really benefits from having both these organizations using the river. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0 passes. The next is a motion to amend the gazebo fee schedule as per the attached and approved transfer of the responsibilities of the rental of the gazebo from the tower's office to the Department of Parks and Recreation. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Oh, sorry. I did have a few things to ask, I guess,
Sure.
about that.
Go ahead.
Actually, Steve, do you mind coming up? Hey,
Good
how you
evening.
doing? So, where did we come up with the 150, or how was that formula calculated?
Well, the fee was produced from my office and the tower's office from projections on what the rate is for 2 hours for that gazebo for weddings. Again, it's just for the ceremony only. It's not for a reception. And so that rate, that existing rate has been there, predates the Parks Department and the Towers office. So it's been there for over at least a dozen or more, 15 years. So that's the rate that was chosen by the the Towers office and the Parks office. We think is suitable for this day and age for 2020 for a 2-hour rental rate.
Yep, okay. And do we have any events already scheduled there for 2020? Or, any 2-hour events?
Well, at any of our rates, if anyone's already reserved rates, that the $25 rate would hold true. Any new reservations would be the new rate. So
Okay, so if someone called this week to book it, it would be at the 150, right?
exactly, yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Anyone else? All in favor?
Oh, sorry, there's,
Aye.
I didn't know if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I didn't see Catherine. Ms. Ciliberto, please.
Catherine Celebrato, 48 Earls Court. Of course, I'm in favor of a rise in a fee, but I'd like to see town residents get a little bit of a reduced fee and out of town pay double, just as they do for the beach, the beach pavilion there. So maybe if the town residents could pay 100 and maybe out of town 200, thought that would be better to give some relief to the town residents. It is our gazebo.
Thank you, Catherine. Good suggestion. So all in favor?
So do we want to amend it? I mean, I actually think that's a great idea.
Everything else is a two-tier. We could wait till when Parks and Rec comes before us for budget and talk about that at that point in time.
We can change it then?
We could change it then, we could change it now. I'm in favor of it. All of the other properties we have a two-tier. Either you're a resident or non-resident. So
Yeah.
I just don't know right now how much we'd want to charge is the only thing. Maybe we should have some time to think about it. Maybe have the input from the Parks and Rec Department this is going to be going under.
Maybe let the Rec Advisory Board just
Yeah.
maybe review it and come back with a...
Second.
I mean, Steve, does this have to be in right away? Because I know you're on a time frame with scheduling and putting things out in flyers and stuff like that.
Better hurry up before that gazebo is just infiltrated with salt water.
I think the responsibility end, I think the Towers office would like to have the responsibility back. I think the logistics for responsibility would be good tonight. The fee, it's not a big deal to us. It's really not about the fee. So the tier fee, we could definitely take a look at and come back to you on the fee. It doesn't.
Basically, we're going to put the responsibility into Parks and Recs and take it away from the towers because they want you to kind of take over on that.
It was at their request to do that, so I have no problem, and we can come back with a suggested tier rate. It's not a lot of money, so that's why we didn't.
So Terry, should we just make a motion to continue this and ask Parks and Rec to come back? Is that the proper?
So I think they want to get a handle on it now.
The
With-
motion is to adopt the fee schedule and approve the transfer of responsibilities, so you could amend the motion.
Okay. Would someone like to amend the motion?
I move we amend it for $100 for residents, $150 for non-residents.
That's fine. That's fine.
That's,
Yeah, I was going to amend it to just transfer the responsibility.
yeah, I agree with Jesse, and then we'll have the Parks Department tell us what they would like to do.
Right.
All right.
So I'll make that motion to amend it.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. All in favor of the amended motion?
Aye.
Aye.
And the amended motion is to have the Parks and Rec Department amend the fee schedule, and we're allowing the responsibilities to be transferred from the gazebo to the towers to the Parks and Rec Department.
Excellent.
Okay. The next motion is a motion to approve the sponsorship agreement with Navigant Credit Union for the 2020 Summer Concert Series at Gazebo Park. Is there a motion? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Discussion from the audience. Thank you to Navigant Credit Union for your generosity. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0 passes. The next is a motion to approve the title sponsorship contract with Mott Chase Sotheby's International Realty for 2020 Summer Concert Series on the beach. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Is there any discussion from the audience? Thank you to Mott Chase Sotheby's. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. The next is a motion to award the bid for personalized beach towels, baseball hats, and beach division to the lowest bidder, SP Design and Manufacturing, in the amount of $14,070. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Discussion from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. The next is from engineering. It's a motion to approve the filling of one vacancy, process control treatment coordinator within the wastewater division due to resignation. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Discussion from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. The next is from the town manager, a motion to approve the contract extension for general heating, ventilation, and air conditioning services with JMB Mechanical for a one-year period at their hourly rate of regular and emergency services and their percentage markups for parts, materials, and equipment under the same terms and conditions as the original contract. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion. Discussion from the audience. Mr. Wojciechowski.
I'm so happy to see, it said here, no change in bid prices. So that means they're pretty well keeping the prices the same for next year as they did last year. And that's pretty fantastic. And if you remember, I think Sherman did that a few meetings ago. I think what we're seeing here is that there's nobody must be getting raises or something. Prices aren't going up. These contractors must not be paying the people more money. We're probably not as well off as we all think. So no increases. I think we ought to transfer that to our tax mentality. No increases. If that's what our people are doing out there, that's what the economy's doing out there, we just can't follow my normal idea was always cost of living. We can go up to cost of living. That's a fair thing to do. But now I'm getting data back here showing that cost of living is not happening. Maybe somewhere there's a government calculation on something somewhere that's probably not valid. What we're experiencing is no increases out there. And that's what I hope you'll consider as you consider your tax increases during the budget time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wojciechowski. The next motion is from Jesse. It's a motion to...
Did we vote on that?
Yeah, we did, and he just came up for a comment, correct, I think? Oh, stop, thank you, Jesse. Is there
Is a motion.
motion, a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. The next is a motion from Jesse. It's a motion to approve the resolution that the town of Narragansett declares February 1st to February 8th, 2020 to be National Gun Violence Survivors Week. Jesse?
Thanks. Yep. So February 1st to February 8th is National Gun Violence Survivor Week. And this resolution is specific to the town to also recognize and declare this week in Narragansett and to honor and remember the victims and survivors of gun violence and to uplift the resilient voices of survivors across the nation. So there are certain purposes that this week serves. One is to put a human face to America's gun crisis. Another is to raise awareness and educate Americans on all forms of gun violence. And then the third is to enable individuals to recognize their direct personal connection to gun violence. So even though we don't necessarily have a gun violence problem in Narragansett, many of us personally know people that were directly affected by violence through guns. And the purpose of this is to really raise awareness and to acknowledge and support survivors of gun violence. So even though it's a national week, if you think about it, how many people in this room were aware of this week? So the reason for this resolution, so there are a few people, but the reason for the resolution, the reason to do it at the town level is to raise awareness at the town level. Because when it's marked nationally, and maybe it doesn't get the publicity that other, weeks do, we can do our part at the town and the city level to spread the word of the resolution and of the week. So that's why it's on the agenda. So thank you.
Is there discussion in the council?
Yeah, I can support this resolution, but I did like something struck out. From the top of the page, if you go to the third whereas down, it says, whereas forms of gun violence can include, but not limited to, gun suicides, gun homicides, domestic violence involving guns, shooting by law enforcement. I would like to strike that and amend this resolution not to say shooting by law enforcement.
So, it's based off of a draft. I did make some edits to it before I put it on. I don't think the intent of this is to necessarily put blame on any parties. It's really just to kind of think about anyone dying or getting shot or surviving. It's not about putting blame anywhere. However, if that wording would keep you from voting on it, I'm fine with removing that.
Okay. And the rest of that sentence is in unintentional shootings. So I move to strike shooting by law enforcement, paragraph 3.
Second.
Let's see what Rick has to say first.
Sure.
So again, this is a resolution, national resolution. I just don't feel that towns should be in these resolutions that is out there nationally. So let's dig into this a little bit. This is a politically rooted coalition, special interest group, if you start looking into it. It identifies as a gun control advocacy group. It's founded and funded by now presidential candidate Michael Bloomberg. It's a 501c4. They've got about $5 million in assets. I don't think towns need to get into what's going on nationally. I think people know what's going on. I think that we need to focus more on what our town's about. I'm more interested in what Stanley said. How am I going to keep the taxes low? How am I going to get the roads done? How am I going to maintain our buildings? I'm not interested in these national people that are coming forward with, whether it's a coalition or a resolution. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in what goes on in our town and our community. I realize what's out there. We know guns is a big thing in this country. There's no question about it. You have a lot of different groups that are either in support or against guns. So I'm definitely not supporting this.
Anyone from the audience wish to speak? Ms. Shabovitz.
Karen Chapshelowitz, 63 Wanda Street. I absolutely support this in every way, shape, or form. I have an 8-year-old granddaughter that when she was 3 went into a police station with her father because he had to be fingerprinted for a counseling license. And the man in front of her was getting a gun permit. And she goes, "Guns? We don't like guns. Guns are nucky nuck. Guns, only policemen should have guns." And I pretty much agree with her. And when we lived in Pennsylvania, a 13-year-old, my son's class, committed suicide and his father was a high school teacher that was well loved, with his father's hunting rifle, which was displayed in their living room in a case. And I'm totally think it comes from educating children about the danger of guns and about the implications of guns. And it's a microcosm what happens in small towns at what's happening at the national level. And I don't think you can separate the two at all. And I don't think it's political. For me, it's personal. And you just can't even imagine what it's like to lose anybody from gun violence. And I totally disagree with you, Mr. Lima.
Thank you.
I totally support you, Jesse.
Anyone else wish to speak? Melissa Jenkins, please.
Thank you, Jesse, for introducing this resolution. I do have to disagree with you on one point, though. You said that Narragansett doesn't necessarily have a gun violence problem. I think that we do. I'm going to read to you something. Chad Thomas O'Brien. Chad Thomas O'Brien, 18, of Star Drive, Narragansett, passed away Friday, November 17th, 2006, at Rhode Island Hospital in Providence. He was born in Providence, the beloved son of Patrick O'Brien of South Kingstown and Rhonda Vespia Gershoff of Narragansett. He is also survived by his stepfather, Thomas Gershoff of Narragansett, and his stepmother, Michelle O'Brien of South Kingstown. Chad was a 2006 Narragansett High School graduate and was attending the University of Rhode Island. He was an honor student and an outstanding athlete. In high school, he lettered in 4 varsity sports: basketball, football, track and field, and cross country. Chad was an avid surfer and enjoyed snowboarding and playing sports, where he had won numerous awards and accolades as a scholar athlete. He enjoyed music and the special bonding with his closest buddies. Chad was very special to his family and friends, and he'll be sadly missed. I could go on, but I think you get the point. This is a terrible story of gun violence. And Chad died by suicide, if you don't know this story. It's tragic. And this is not about gun control or gun safety even. This is just about honoring people who have lost a family member or been a victim of gun violence themselves. It's not a political agenda. This is a very personal agenda to many people in Narragansett. It's a tragedy for many, and I hope that you will honor them by recognizing this locally. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Alberto?
Catherine Celebrato, 48 Earls Court. I also agree this is not about gun control, for or against gun control, and I really disagree with you, Richard, about this. This is just a well-intentioned resolution, and I don't know why we're picking it to death. It seems absurd to me, and it's also denial to say that we do not have a gun control problem in this town. As this woman said, that young man committed suicide with his grandfather's gun. The husband of a Narragansett high school teacher committed suicide with a gun. There are people in this town who have weapons they shouldn't have. I had an elderly neighbor. He had a rifle in his garage, hanging in his garage, and he had other guns in his house. I really think, besides this, we should try to make an effort to get any guns that are in this town not being utilized properly, or just, people have guns, you know, they take them back from when they were in the service, and they come upon them, they just happen to buy them, they buy them at, I used to have clients that used to buy rifles at Kmart when they sold them. These guns are still out there. There's 393 million legally obtained guns in this country, and there's only 363 million people. And I think that if you delve into this even more, that you'll find that a lot of the gun violence is committed by guns that are stolen from people's homes. But anyway, I'm getting off the track. This is a well-intentioned resolution. I think we should just pass it and move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Pam?
Hi, my name is Barbara Swanson. I live in Narragansett. I'm a lead for Moms Demand Action. I've worked with them for 6 years. I'm a volunteer. We are not a political group. We do have NRA members in our group. We have veterans in our group. We are 6 million people. And I, right now, am the lead for the Red Flag Law, which is suicide by gun. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but South County has the largest number of suicides by gun in the state. So we are 10 times more likely in the United States to be a victim of gun crime, or gun violence, I'm sorry. It's not limited to the Providence. We have gun suicides, we have gun homicides, domestic violence involving a gun, unintentional shooting, children find a gun and shoot themselves with it. We are 58% of American adults responded that they or someone they care about has been impacted by gun violence. I'm a victim of gun violence. There are 22,000 Americans that die each and every year of firearm suicide. It's crazy to think otherwise. A gun in the house with someone who is suffering from a form of mental illness or depression, or like Chad was a girlfriend. You know, I was the survivor lead for 3 years. I know these people. They're just like you and me. The burden of homicides fall heaviest on the communities already facing structural disadvantages. We know that. But our rates are just as high as Providence. Theirs is a different types of gun violence than ours. Every year, 100,000 Americans survive a gunshot wound and are faced with lifelong process of physical and emotional healing, as well as financial. Gun violence in children, firearms are the second leading cause of gun deaths to children. Black children, it's the first. Every year, 3,000 children and teens are shot and killed, and approximately 15,600 are shot and injured. Domestic violence, we know that mass shooters, most of them are domestic violence, have a crime of domestic violence against them, and there are 4.5 million American women today, alive today, who have been threatened by a gun, by an intimate partner. Hate crimes with guns, we don't really need to worry about that so much down in Narragansett, but there's more than 28 hate crimes with guns a day. What really bothers me is the children. Instances like Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School in Florida. After that shooting, we have one little girl that went to school there. It created new anxieties for younger generations of students. In a recent national poll, 75% of high school students aged 15 to 17 cited mass shootings as a primary source of stress. More than 1 in 5 reported that the possibility of a shooting at a school is a source of stress on a day-to-day basis. I think we're doing our children a big disservice by brushing it under the rug. And they need to know that they're safe and that we realize that we are the adults and we're going to keep them safe. And because we're in Narragansett, and it is a national deal, we have been asked to go from town to town. Town politics are important. Go from town to town, talk about gun violence. Then we can do state to state, and then we do federal. To think that because we're in Narragansett, it doesn't affect us is ridiculous. And again, we have NRA members, we have veterans. My husband shoots guns. His number one concern is gun violence in the country. So it affects all of us, and I hope that you will take the week and honor the victims of gun violence, because most of you do know someone who's been affected by gun violence. I think if you take a poll, probably 75% of us know someone, whether it's suicide or murder or whatever it may be. But thank you for the time. And Jesse, thank you very much for the...
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Ms. Amoroso?
Susan Amoruso, West Bay Drive. I didn't plan on saying anything, but I was really shocked by thinking that we should just worry about taxes and we don't have anything to worry about in Narragansett. I don't think that the people in Westerly really thought they had anything to worry about, but there it was in Westerly. I don't think that I heard about 2 shootings today. It's just every single day. The people in the Greyhound bus terminal, were they thinking about it? And if this isn't something to be concerned about, as Mr. Lima thinks, then why is our school department having lockdown drills? They're doing it to keep kids safe because this is a very real threat in every single American town, every city, no matter where you live. No one is immune to this kind of thing. And it is a #1 concern with parents and children. We even had, I believe, on the beach, a mass shooting drill this past spring or summer. I mean, our police think this is a concern. So I think by honoring people who have been associated with the gun violence that is rampant in this country and has, I'm sad to say, has the potential to happen at any time, any place, we should honor people, and that's kind of what it is. But my reaction is to concern for taxes. Well, I'm concerned for people and the quality of life for people, and I find it sad that all of my grandchildren living all different parts of the country, they feel this tension. They have the lockdown drills, and how sad it is that this is what our kids are faced with. So I think it helps people who have survived this with a relative, with a neighbor, with a friend, to know that we are aware as a country and we feel badly for them, and we want to express sympathy for their loss or their disability.
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski?
I wasn't going to speak also, but the topic of guns, I don't know what this resolution does, brings up guns. And my wife was in the house, and there was 3 people who broke in. She's in bed. She's in bed, and she hears 3 people out there. I fought with her many times that she could carry a weapon, concealed weapon, to protect herself. She will not listen. 3 people entered the house in Narragansett. Luckily, she had the cell phone and called the police, and state police got out there fast enough to chase these people, get them. Possession of a gun is many times so valuable. It saves lives. I understand suicides. We can jump off a bridge out there, suicide. If we don't have a gun, we'll jump off a bridge. Lack of a gun is not going to stop a suicide. I don't think so. Maybe some kind of education. I don't know what. All I know is the value of the gun can't be diminished. It is necessary to save your life. Yes, at times, negatives can happen on anything, even your car. You can kill with your car. For us to single out a gun as the problem and to make me think that guns are so terrible when my wife almost died because she didn't have a gun, and today still won't get one. And yes, we want to honor the people that have been hurt in any fashion. and try to prevent that from happening. But to put such a negative light on the value that could save your life, your mother's life, someone's life, I think is wrong. Therefore, we should just stay away from this discussion and let the police and those, the gun training groups, we have that gun thing up there in Peacedale, they're training people how to use gun appropriately. Let's learn or teach our children, teach everyone how to use it appropriately. They did that in the Army for me. They taught me to use a gun, and he demanded that I be mentally willing to kill somebody with this gun. It was a very stressful situation that I was going to have to, and I went to the major and I said, I've got to kill this person over there. Yes, even if he's not shooting you, you must kill him first, because that's the military. He's the enemy. If you don't kill him first, he will kill you. This is the attitude out there. I didn't bring it back. But in different situations, there is different attitudes and different responsibilities, different training required. We must focus on that and not in just demonizing this thing called a gun. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wojciechowski. Yes, sir.
Peter Drago, Lake Worth Avenue. I just want to thank you for bringing this up. I think a motion like this, which causes discussion, is worth it. This is democracy in action. I go with let's run with something like this. If I read it correctly, it's just recognizing survivors. It's not making a judgment call on the use of guns, whether you should have a gun or not. And whether it passes or not, I think there's a value to bringing it up. Because it is a national issue, and you can make the point that it's a national issue, why should we do it locally? But I think if it causes us all to get more involved locally, it's done its job. So thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Sure, I just want to add a couple thoughts to this as well. I spoke to Jesse briefly before this. I think it's a great idea to put this on a motion. It definitely is a great discussion point today. We have people in this town, there's a family in this town whose grandchildren were at Sandy Hook that terrible day. So gun violence certainly is a national issue and a Narragansett issue. And I do believe, and I'll let Rick speak for himself, but I believe that's what he was getting to. It's an issue all around. As a matter of fact, Rick is leading the charge, I think, among the council to try to have another police officer put at the elementary school. So we'll have officers at every school, wanting to make sure our children feel safe at school. But as the gentleman just mentioned, I believe this is a national issue. It certainly is a great opportunity for us to think about it today. But we made a conscious decision on the council last term not to have any additional national days assertion put on for a proclamation. And I think that's a good idea. I think that certainly Narragansett has this issue that we need to resolve. But it's nothing that I'd like to see as far as a written motion. But I thank Jesse for bringing it to the town attention. I think this was a great discussion today. Any further discussion on the council?
Yeah, I just have a couple quick last thoughts on it. Just want to reiterate that this is definitely not about gun control. In fact, there's a line in here that says to encourage responsible gun ownership to help keep our communities safe. So it's very intentional that gun control is not mentioned or anything even worded to allude to gun control. It really is about remembering and acknowledging and supporting victims of gun violence and survivors. And I also want to apologize for kind of misspeaking about, Narragansett not being affected. I think I was thinking more relatively compared to other cities and towns. However, I completely understand what Melissa and Barbara were mentioning. And, I'm aware of instances over the last decade in Narragansett with deaths from guns. So my intent was definitely not to minimize any of those events. And in terms of it being a national thing, so So I have a relative on my wife's side who's a younger man who, because of something extremely stupid he did with a gun, is now in jail for the rest of his life. And his son doesn't have a mother. So that happened in California. We live in Rhode Island. So I don't really, I don't know how this is a national issue when it affects all of us directly in every town. So I don't, I don't really get that point. But yeah, so I'm glad we're discussing it at least. So we'll see how the vote goes. So appreciate it.
Anyone else from council?
Well, again, I can supporting survivors of gun violence, but I cannot support this resolution as is. So I don't know.
All right, well, we'll see how the vote goes.
Could you please come to the podium and speak so they can hear you at home?
As a leader with moms, I absolutely support your thoughts on that, and I have the authority to say, yeah, that's good. It's just to honor people. It really is, and just to bring awareness of, our condition in America. And
right. Well, I'm not going to approve something that lumps law enforcement with suicides and gun homicides, domestic violence and gun violence. I mean,
I think you take the police out of it.
I'll make an amendment to remove shootings by law enforcement from the resolution.
I'm good with
Second.
And we'll do the full motion after. Can we do that amendment?
We do that, Terry?
That amendment was already on the floor,
Okay.
waiting for a vote.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Removed. Okay.
That's just for the amendment. So
that
for the
4-0?
motion? All in favor for the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. No, no, sorry. Motion fails 2-2. The last motion for the evening is a motion to approve the draft response written by the town manager and to send it to RIDOT. Is there a motion?
So moved. Oh, second.
Discussion?
Start.
Sure, go ahead.
So I put this motion on as a follow-up to our meeting 2 weeks ago. The attachment is a letter written by the town manager, Jim Tierney, with a couple updates based on our discussion from the last meeting. Based on the way that things went at the last meeting, it sounded like we were pretty much in consensus or in agreement on asking the state for the funding to use really in a more flexible way for permitting, design, and planning to do a more full bike path that goes all the way to the town beach. So this would be the official response from the town to the state, and it is attached. And really, we're just voting to approve that and to have it sent to the state and then take it from there.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so, I agreed to allow the funding for this bike path to be considered as long as, again, it was going to go through the Canachet Farm. I'm not going to approve going along the back of the ballpark, along Sprague, the playground, the Indian, and then have a parking area with bike racks, and then people funnel from there to the beach, however. If they think that they can get it through Canachet Farm and get down to the beach at some point, fine. It's not going to happen overnight. I think this bike path has been going on for over 20 years. They knew from day one the toughest destination was from where it is now to get to the beach, because there was no way of doing it without either going through Canachet Farm or going through a neighborhood. And as I said before, there's 9 houses on School Street. They didn't want it to go down School Street. I can't see where you're going to try to get it to go down Wanda or Othmar. There's 20-some houses there, and people don't want their road rerouted, one-ways, sidewalks, bike lanes, any of that to change their neighborhood. So I'm on board if they want to go through Conachit Farm. If they come back and they say, we're going to do a plan to go behind the park and then dump out by the Indian, I'm not going to be in favor of that at all.
Jim, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Not really. The letter is self-explanatory. The original one, everyone looked at before. We made a few minor adjustments after the last council meeting.
Perfect. Anyone from the audience? Did one of the Smiths, Professor?
Yeah, it just would be helpful if we saw the draft, so we knew what we were talking about.
Thank you. Sir?
Good evening. My name is Bob Vatava. I chair the Friends of the South County Bike Path, and we appreciate the leadership of your recommendation to have the letter from the town manager go to the state to see if we can proceed through Conachit Farm. I'm sure you're probably aware of some of the other very positive events that have started or taken place on the bike path. The connection from URI is now complete on the bike path. It goes from 138 at the university, and it can be reached quickly by Ministerial Road. Just a little bit south of Ministerial Road, you'll see where the connection comes in. Also, the town of South Kingston is now in the process of connecting the South County Commons to the state, to the town's recreation department building. If you go out, it's in construction at this particular time. If you go to the Commons, and you can go to the edge of where it starts, and you can see there's a very sophisticated switchback that has been established to accommodate the grade change going from the Commons down onto this path. So again, there's across the country, it's realized more and more attention is being placed to bicycles as well as pedestrian access. So again, we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski.
I think, Councilman Leamy, you got the kind of on the right path, if you will. If you look at Nullman down at the, they have a large wooden bridge that goes over the swampy area, and it works. So it just seems so logical that we could find enough wooden bridges to take the bicycle across Conachit. And no matter how big it's got to be, maybe there'll be some wood supplier that eventually might give us the wood for a sign or something, and we could build a bridge long enough to span those areas that we have to. So we ought to just really set our sights on going through that Conachit area that's not being utilized for anything of the animals right now, and I don't think they'll be hurt that much by having a wooden structure going over for a bike path. Just seems such a logical idea that we ought to kind of hopefully focus on that rather than the congestive spots in the center of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Salbroto.
Catherine Celebrato, 48 Earls Court. This is a substantial reduction in funds. We went from $8.43 million to $3 million. Now, the $3 million they gave us, they want us to construct the path. They don't want more studies and advisory opinions and all of that other stuff, right? The other thing is this. Have other cities and towns been cut like this for their bike paths? Well, you know, and I understand Amendment 19, I read it, they want to divert the money to fix bridges and all this other stuff. But we need a bike path to the beach. This seems to me would be a priority, not just for our town, but really for statewide bike riders. I don't know why we just don't sue the downstate and ask for the rest of the money. You know, maybe they shouldn't be diverting the money to whatever, or maybe some of the money they're diverting could be diverted back to us. We're kind of like just like rolling over and playing dead here and hoping that our reps can squeeze some more money out. Maybe we can go a little further. Forget it. Just sue them. That's what I sue them for the money that they promised us.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mrs. Smith.
Rosemary Smith, 24 Castle Road. I would encourage the town manager and the town council to send the response to the RIDOT letter of May 2019, saying that we want to continue the conversation about what the town of Narragansett envisions for the bike path. In the last few weeks, the town residents have clearly said they want the bike path to go to the beach, it needs to be off-road, and we have learned that we have the backing of our terrific state representatives, Tansey and McEntee, to help us get through this difficult funding process. I had the opportunity today to look over a document that had been sent to the town on November 27th, 2018. It was a memorandum from VHB, which is a consulting firm which was hired by the Rhode Island Department of Transportation to write a project readiness review. It's clear that the only element that was considered with this permeability was the permeability of the project, the ability to get permits to do the construction there. What was left out were two other important criteria: the safety of the path users and the overall aesthetics. So town residents have declared that on-street is not safe on our narrow, well-traveled streets, and we all agree that the ambience of a bike path through Canachet Farm is far superior to riding next to vehicles on town roads. There was an additional criteria from the readiness report which talks about construction costs. Our state reps have promised to help find funding to complete the path to the beach. This is a project where council members, town staff, town residents, and state representatives are working toward a common goal, which is pretty hard to find right now in our country. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else? Misha Shabowitz.
Karen Shabowitz. I'd hate to waste the money on another traffic study. I know there have been traffic studies on 1A in the middle of winter when the conditions of traffic are very different than they are in the summer or on a holiday. I'm talking about for construction of some of the stores that went up there. I'd rather have the money spent on improving the environmental opportunities for children and families in Narragansett, because many of the wooded areas are disappearing due to construction. I mean, we moved here and there used to be a dirt road with a rope at the end of it or a chain going up to Canachet Farms, and none of those houses were there. And I noticed how people get all these variations based on water, I don't know, the water issues when they hire a lawyer and bring a lawyer in to get these variations. And I wonder whether it's really been explored to the full extent, whether we can get permits through Canachet Farms. I worry that that's a political issue, and I'd like to see that more explored so that children and families in town can enjoy the Canachet Farm area. Thank you.
Anyone else? Ma'am?
I certainly didn't come for this, but when my children grew up, my son went to school with Jesse. There were things for these kids to do in town. There's nothing for these kids to do in town. I'm disabled and I started riding a bike. My husband begs me not to ride in Narragansett. I ride from Narragansett to South Kingstown. It's dangerous. My daughter is looking to possibly move back in town, and I've told her not to because there's nothing in town. What are the kids going to do here in town? I've suggested South Kingstown, I've suggested Charlestown, Jamestown, but I don't suggest Narragansett. And I think that you need to address that. And I think, by God, a bike path is a simple little thing. I'd like to see it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any further discussion from the council?
I just wanted to say something real quick. Richard mentioned that it would be helpful if there was something on the screen, and then I realized that the attached letter is not in the packet in the room tonight. You'd have to get it off the website. So I'll just take a second just to read just the 3 bullet points from the letter that I think sum up the point of the letter. So the following bullet points represent the town's position. 1, reiterate that either alternatives 1, 2, and 3A would be the town's preferred route. So those 3 routes are through Canachet Farms. Number 2, emphasize that the town does not and will not endorse an on-road option with the modifications that were discussed. And then 3, request that RIDOT authorize flexibility to expend some or all of the $3 million for advanced design and or permitting of the town's preferred alternatives. So that's basically the ask in the letter. There's more wording than that, but I think that sums it up for the most part. So sorry that there's nothing on the screen for you.
Any further? All in favor? Aye.
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 Motion passes 4-0. Okay, we're moving on to the open forum. If you could please conduct yourself in an orderly manner, respectful manner. I've asked our town sergeant to move to the front of the room, and tonight he will be signaling to the people at the podium when we reach 2 minutes and 45 seconds, so they'll know they'll have 15 seconds to sum up their thoughts. And then again, at 3 minutes, he will let them know that their time is up. Is there anyone here wishing to speak? Mrs. Nardone.
My name is Jean Nardone, and I live on 31 Hollywood Avenue in Narragansett, in Briggs Farm. And I'd like to thank the council for passing the temporary moratorium on building. I'm just sorry that you didn't do it before the 2 5-bedroom homes that are currently being built in our neighborhood. And I guess I just want to encourage you to think about what it means to live in a residential neighborhood. Briggs Farm is a very compact neighborhood, and the new homes that are being built are what we like to call URI dormitories. And I just would like you to think about whether the town has reached a tipping point where we are no longer family friendly. It seems to me that young families can no longer afford to live in town. I guess we're lucky because we have the beach. College students bring a lot of revenue to the town, and I appreciate that. Sometimes in college towns, real estate loses its value, not for us. The values in our homes are amazing because of our, I guess, rental potential. So just my plea is to please consider how Narragansett can take care of the needs of residents as well as the rental community. Thank you.
Anyone else? Gentleman in the back.
Good evening. My name is Tom Callahan. I live at 26 Baltimore Avenue. In the overall scheme of the things you're discussing tonight, whether it be climate change and sea level rise and beaches and moratoriums on dormitory-style housing, or raising the awareness of victims of gun violence, issue I'm interested in tonight is relatively minor, but it's important to me, and I'm asking for your help. I've been trying for about 60 days now, a little longer than that, to get an answer to what I think is a relatively straightforward question from town staff, and that is whether the planning board, when it sits in its quasi-judicial function to review applications that come before it, is bound by any rules with respect to conversations that take place with board members outside an official meeting. The reason I raise that, and it's essentially referred to in the trade as ex parte conversations, the reason I raise it is because it goes to the heart of fairness in terms of how applications are considered. If there are parties that are having ex parte conversations outside of an official meeting on an application, and there are provisions either by law or statute or ordinance or procedure that's adopted by the planning board or by past practice, that ought to be well known and should be available to people in terms of understanding what the rules of engagement are. If there are no rules, that's fine. So that everyone plays by the same rules is what's important here. The specific incident that kind of triggered this is I've been following an application for about 2 years now. It is in front of the planning, it continues to be in front of the planning board. It's an application with respect to a master plan for residential development off of Clark Road. In the course of a recess in a meeting that took place in a meeting that took place in October, I was approached by a member of the planning board who indicated that he could be, the quote was, I could be lobbied on this application. I did not take that to be inappropriate in terms of looking for financial remuneration or anything of that nature. Simply that I could be lobbied on this. I said to him, hey, wait, I think, aren't there prohibitions against ex parte conversations with respect to the board and the conduct of its application hearings? He said, no, there aren't. It caused me to report to the town staff, initially through the planning, community development department, ultimately up through Jim and the town solicitor. In 2 or 3 correspondence that I've had with Jim, the advice that has come from the town solicitor has been to go to the State Ethics Commission. It's not the appropriate venue. It's not in what's being communicated here is not that there was a board member who was looking to be inappropriately benefited financially. I'll summarize, thank you. So what I'm asking you for your help is essentially, it's a very straightforward question. Can you get me an answer to the question in the next 7 days in terms of what rules the planning board follows with respect to our ex parte conversations on active applications? Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Wojciechowski.
Yes, Dan Wojciechowski. Again, can't help finishing off about debt, money. If you want families, let's keep the taxes down where they belong, or keep them low. That should help families. The state treasurer, Magazina, made some calculations and says we cannot afford a bond. We can't afford a library bond. That's what that was professional calculations finance. So I thought about how can I help? Let's help the library try to make some decisions. And I just come up with 2 suggestions quickly. One, I guess we could just spend $1 million to fix up the existing building, and that would be our quiet space library. Nice quiet space, go in there and you study, computers, whatever. That's a quiet space. Take another $2 million, spend it on a library annex located at the community center. So now we have maybe an addition to the community center so that we can use the community center as well as this addition for the events. We have ample parking. We have the school, probably we can use the gym for a large situation, movies, the whole thing without bothering the quiet space. So it just seems an annex, a library annex at the community center is the answer. So now we end up spending maybe $3 million rather than $5, $6, $7 million, whatever it is. We ought to look for alternatives, unless, of course, the library, who are so good at it, can raise enough money for fundraising. If they, and whatever they can raise in fundraising, fine, but the tax pocket is not available according to the professionals. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Good night.